So we are about to pick up on another rather short section of Scripture, but hopefully something that will be of benefit to you. As you can see from the slide, we are going to be looking at Mark, the second chapter, in verses 18 through 22. And by way of reminder, when we finished up in the 17th verse of chapter 2, Jesus is talking to the disciples that are complaining that he is eating and drinking with tax collectors and sinners, and telling them that those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. And he tells them he did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And so we're going to pick up now at verse 18. And the disciples of John and of the Pharisees were fasting. And they came and said to him, "Why did the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" So Jesus said to them, "Can the friends of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast in those days. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, or else the new piece pulls away from the old, and the tear is made worse. And no one puts new wine in old wineskins, or else the new wine bursts, the wineskin is spilled, and the wineskins are ruined. But new wine must be put into new wineskins." And so as we take a look at that, at first glance, it might seem a little bit confusing, especially to someone you are trying to teach who is fairly new to understanding or may not have much understanding as to what the Bible has to say and what it has to teach us. But if we just take our time and if we simply look at what's here, I believe that we can explain to someone else and understand for ourselves what it is that we're to learn from these verses. So the first thing we have in verse 18 is we have the question, why do the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not? And so you can see that the people are seeing a difference between those who follow after Jesus and those who have followed after John and who have followed after the Pharisees in the past. And Jesus and his disciples, we understand, are currently feasting with the sinners and tax collectors. That's where we left off in our previous study. And Mark doesn't identify for us those who are questioning Jesus. He simply has the question asked. They address their concern to Jesus, assuming he'll take responsibility for the behavior of his disciples. So as we're sitting and as we're talking to someone, we can simply point out to the person that we're studying with and note for ourselves that right now we're starting to see a difference between what Jesus and his disciples are doing and what those who have followed John and the Pharisees in the past are doing. And that's going to be kind of a key point for us to recognize as we move forward. And so we have this question expressed to Jesus, and then we have his answer. Can the can the friends of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. Now, feasting and marriage back in that time was a little bit different than it is today. And you don't have to go into a great deal of detail in regard to how they used to handle things and the length of time. If you were to study some of that, it does talk about how it would last about a week or so, that there would be celebration and various things. But for purposes of our understanding of what's here, we don't need to go into all that. We simply need to understand that Jesus is saying, as long as the bridegroom remains with the people, then they cannot fast. Then they need to continue to eat and drink and rejoice with the bridegroom. And in our metaphor, Jesus, of course, is the bridegroom. And so he's talking about, can those who are with him fast as long as he is with them? And he's wanting them to understand that he is there, he is the bridegroom, and as long as he is with them, they should not fast, but that they should enjoy the opportunity and they should enjoy the opportunity and the privilege of having him in their presence. The disciples are doing just that. They are celebrating and following Jesus, who they recognize as an amazing teacher and an amazing healer. And so he's saying that this is a good thing. The reason that they're not doing that is because I, as the bridegroom, am still here, and they should still rejoice with me. So why would they need to feel, why would they feel a need to fast when things are going well? And so that's kind of the point that we can bring out and that we can understand as we're looking at this, is that because Jesus is still there with them, this is not a time of sorrow. This is not a time to be concerned. It is a time more so to rejoice and to enjoy having the presence of the bridegroom in our midst. And then he goes on to say, but the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast in those days. And so again, he tells them that this is not the time to fast, but there will come a time when the bridegroom will no longer be there, and in those days they will fast, or they may mourn, or they may change their focus. They won't have the same time to celebrate because the bridegroom is no longer there. And so if we understand in this metaphor that Jesus is the bridegroom, then we understand that what he's trying to tell them is there will come a time when he is no longer in their presence, and they won't have that time to spend in enjoyment with him. It is at this time when he is gone that there will be sorrow for his disciples. So he's really saying, let them enjoy, and they should enjoy the time that they have now, because there'll be plenty of time for concern in the future when the bridegroom, when Jesus himself is no longer there in their midst. And then he moves on to this analogy of the unshrunk cloth. And he says, no one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, or else the new piece pulls away from the old, and the tear is made worse. Now, if you're a person who grew up, and you can remember when there were times that you might get a hole in your pants or something like that, that your parents, your mother in particular, in order to save money, might go ahead and try and sew a patch onto the garment in order to protect or to cover up the hole. As we look into this and as we consider this, in that time, they would understand what it is that Jesus is talking about. When Jesus speaks to the people, when he uses analogies, and we can explain this to the person that we're talking to, he's using things that are readily understood because they're a part of the everyday life of the people that he is dealing with. So what can we get from this verse? Again, it says, no one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, or else the new piece pulls away from the old, and the tear is made worse. And there's an understanding that when a new patch is washed for the first time, it will shrink and teareth the old garment. And this new hole would be worse than the first. And again, I apologize. I find about one of these in every, at least one of these in every section that I do. That word should not be hold, but that word should be the new hole would be worse than the first. So what he's really saying is that the old and the new cannot be blended together. And that's really the point that he's trying to make. And so remember that he's still in the process of answering the question. We have to make sure that we understand, and the person that we're studying with understands, that he's still speaking in regard to the question of why his disciples are not fasting. But the point that he makes, he says, is that the old and the new cannot be blended. And then he goes on to say, and no one puts new wine into old wineskin, or else the new wine bursts the wineskins, the wine is spilled, and the wineskins are ruined. But new wine must be put into new wineskins. And so again, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is it that he's trying to say to the people? What is this analogy that he's giving them that they would understand, and what can we see? And what we understand and what they would understand is that the old skins have already been stretched so that they are no longer flexible. And if you put new wine into those old wineskins, the new wine will ferment, and it will expand, and it will break the inflexible skins. So, again, if we look at the point he's trying to make, is simply that the old and the new are not compatible. Doing things and mixing a mixture of the old and the new does not work. So, as we consider this question, what Jesus is really trying to get at is the time for change has come. You see, in the past, what the Pharisees did and what the followers of John did was to fast and to do certain things. But now the time has come for people to understand the teachings of Jesus and what he is bringing forth. So we have Jesus, who has now come to this earth to teach, and in our analogy, Jesus' teaching would be the new wine. And the scribes, the Pharisees, and the priests would represent the old way of doing things, or the old wineskins. And what Jesus is trying to say is that Jesus and his teachings cannot be bottled in old wineskins. His teaching can't be mixed with old rituals. His teaching is something different. He's saying that the two are not compatible. The time has come now for a change. And so what he's explaining is that things are different now. So the reason that his disciples are not doing the same thing as what the followers of John and the followers of the Pharisees had done is because now things are different. And now his teachings are different. And what he's teaching them is that as long as he is with them, they should take advantage of the opportunity that they have, because the time will come when he is no longer going to be with them. So the reason that they're not doing the same thing as the others is because they are there to take advantage of his presence. Hopefully that makes sense both to you and to the person that you will be studying potentially with. But the thing to keep in mind is that Jesus oftentimes says things in order to set things up. And he's really trying to explain how the old law and the old way of doing things is now coming to an end, and what he's bringing with him is change. And so he's going to kind of address even further. In our next section, we'll pick up at verse 23, and he's going to kind of address the idea of the Sabbath, and he's going to continue to kind of address or deal with how things are changing now that he is on the earth. I appreciate your time and look forward to bringing up another piece of information to you from the book of Mark in the very near future.